Alright, just had to set some things up, but I am back. And I was supposed to stream yesterday morning, but that was just not in the cards, so that to happen unfortunately. But I am back today, and it is kind of a blessing in disguise that I didn't actually cover anything yesterday, because as far as any articles that caught my eye, there weren't many that caught my eye unfortunately for today. But there are some interesting enough titles, not just titles, but I mean articles that's available, as well as the coverage of certain topics that I think would be pretty good to cover right about now. Let me just have a look over here. Alright. I'll just put that aside. Okay. So I'm probably going to be out for like an hour, and that would be it. I don't think this is going to be a particularly long... I don't think this will be a particularly long stream that's going to happen. Let me just add the first timestamp. Let me go over here real quick. Oh, this is something I actually... Can I... Can't. That is completely fine. What I need is for this thing to not cover up a window. But it's covering windows anyway. Okay, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. Let me just add the first timestamp in. If you hear dogs in the background, I do apologize for that. That is something that's out of my control. Okay, so Nvidia reportedly raises GPU prices by 10 to 15% as manufacturing costs surge. Tariffs and TSMC price hikes filter down to retailers. So I just want to have a look at which cards are affected by this. A new report claims that Nvidia has recently raised the official prices of nearly all of its products to combat the impact of tariffs and surging manufacturing costs on its business, with gaming graphics cards receiving a 5 to 10% hike, while the AI GPUs see up to a 15% increase. As reported by DigiTimes Taiwan, which was translated, Nvidia is facing multiple crises, including a 5.5 billion hit to its quarterly earnings over export restrictions on AI chips, including a ban on sales of its H20 chips to China. And this is also partly due to the most advanced supercomputers that can't be sold to China, as well as cards such as the 5090D, which have, I think, officially been banned. Reports were speculating, but I think it's official at this point that the 5090D will no longer be sold in China. DigiTimes reports that CEO Jensen Huang has been shuttling back and forth between the US and China to minimize the impact of tariffs, and that in order to maintain stable profitability, Nvidia has reportedly recently raised official prices for almost all of its products, allowing its partners to increase prices accordingly. Now, this can probably be boiled down to the fake MSRP that we've been seeing, where Nvidia, everyone knows Nvidia was not completely honest with its MSRP. They just had that insanely low MSRP because AMD did not announce any MSRP, so they just wanted as low a price as possible that they could get away with, which, to be fair, they have decently gotten away with it in certain countries. But despite the hikes, DigiTimes claims Nvidia's financial report at the end of the month should be within financial forecasts and deliver excellent profit results, driven by strong demand for AI chips outside of China and expanding spending from cloud service providers. The report states that Nvidia has applied official price hikes to numerous products to keep its earnings stable, with partners following suit. As an example, Digitimes cites that the RTX 5090 bought at a premium prices upon release without hesitation, such that channel pricing quickly doubled. The report noted that the following AI chip ban, the RTX 5090 prices climbed further still, surging overnight from around NT dollar 90,000 to 100,000 NT dollars. I don't know what. Let me just have a look. What is this? What currency is this? It is. I do not see anything. National Treasury, I guess, is what I'm seeing anyway. With other RTX 50 series cards also increasing by 5 to 10%, Digitimes notes Nvidia has also raised the prices of its H200 and B200 chips, with server vendors increasing prices by up to 15% accordingly. According to the publication's supply chain sources, price hikes have been exacerbated by the shift of Blackwell chip production to TSMC's US plant, which has driven a significant rise in price of production materials and logistics. And that was one of the things what I said about when I was talking about Huawei and its AI chip manufacturing and supercomputer chip manufacturing, was that in China the working conditions are much poorer than US working conditions, and labor is much cheaper as well. So your running costs are significantly lower in China compared to the US, and the US has many regulations around its work environments and when it comes to paying your employees and such. And China doesn't have the same tight leash on those regulations. There is some hope that measures could be temporary. However, following the news that US and China have agreed on a trade deal that should cut tariffs by 115%, so we're looking at a 30% tariff, I guess, thanks to a 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs. As with the latent price increases being passed on to consumers, however, it could be some time before prices start to fall, and chances are they probably won't fall until the near end of the generation, because historically the prices don't drop until you're in that final 9-ish months, and then they start rising again around month 2 or month 3 in a GPU's lifespan, in terms of close to the end, because at that point they halted production and it's all completely almost all completely dried up, and they only have enough for RMA reasons or refund reasons. Let's have a look at the comments. I don't see anything in particular, but in any case, everyone knows that the MSRP of Nvidia was never going to be its original MSRP. Everyone knew that that was just a last minute change that they made to whatever MSRP they had to counteract the fact that AMD did not release an MSRP for its 9070 XT and 9070. So everything had to adapt accordingly just so that they could MSRP outmatch AMD, which unfortunately did not go down well, because you can't really find any of these cards at MSRP, and obviously it's because they were never meant to be at that MSRP, they were meant to be higher. But prices should eventually go down, but when they go down, it will probably be the only time that they will go down, and then after that period, that short period that they do go down, they'll probably increase again. So if you are waiting and you're patient enough to wait for a lowering in price, you should 100% grab that opportunity with both hands when it arises, because it will probably never come back. Alright, let me just add one more timestamp. So Maxsun registers several Intel Arc B580 24GB models with the EEC. So this is potentially the professional card that everyone was talking about. I doubt this will be for consumers. I highly doubt. This card is not really the type of card that utilizes 24GB of VRAM on a consumer level. It just doesn't have the performance for that. The 12GB is honestly like the peak of what this card is going to be capable of processing in terms of saturating the VRAM buffer. Now, just days before Computex, the parent company of Maxsun has registered a new Intel Arc B580 model with 24GB of VRAM with the EEC via Allrock at X, further stoking existing rumors of high VRAM Battlemage card. Remember that EEC, the Eurasian Economic Commission, submissions aren't definitive confirmations of any product. Manufacturers often register placeholder configurations to cover all future possibilities, many of which never end up seeing the light of day. Therefore, you should treat this leak with a healthy dose of skepticism. Intel launched its Arc B580 and Arc B570 GPUs in December and January respectively, bringing its Battlemage architecture to the desktop market just months after Lunar Lake debuted on mobile. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that these GPUs initially caused a stir in the market, offering an ample 12GB of VRAM buffer, a capacity unheard of in the $250 GPU market. The cheapest B580s on Newegg and Best Buy are now in the $300 territory, which is a shame. In fact, you would probably find these closer to $330 these days. That's a trend most new GPUs are facing, including AMD's 9000 GPUs and Nvidia's 50 series. We've been hearing rumors of a 24GB Battlemage professional GPU since December. Recently, Sparkle accidentally alluded to the existence of an Arc B580 24GB, later retracing their comments, likely due to NDA concerns. Maxsun's parent company has registered several GPUs with EEC, including the MaxsunIntel Arc B580 iCraft 24G and its OC variant, matching the exact configuration Sparkle mentioned. And over here we can see the naming and the specs. Are there any specs that we can look at? There are none. I see no specs. In any case, we can move on. Officially speaking, Intel has so far only confirmed more professional GPUs likely based on Battlemage for Computex. There's a significant overlap here, as sources are divided on whether the BMG G21 variant with 24GB of memory is intended for workstations. Likely the Arc Pro P60, or consumers likely the Arc B580 24GB. Assuming this 24GB model joins Intel's consumer-grade B580 lineup, it stands to reason Intel probably has something more powerful in the pipeline for its workstation offerings. Intel's BMG 21 die allows for 20 XE cores, which contain 2560 shaders, which is designed as a competitor to Nvidia's RTX 4060-8107. Pricing differences aside, despite more VRAM, it would still be eclipsed in raw compute by even the entry-level RTX Pro 4000 Blackwell, which has Nvidia's GB203 chip under the hood. Export data from NBD purports the existence of a larger BMG G31 die. Most of these shipments are Vietnam bound, which hosts several OSAT companies that have a history of packaging and assembling Intel products. So will Intel bring in BMG G31 GPUs to the table? We're pinning our hopes on Computex for the official word. Now, I highly doubt that we're going to get a high-end Battlemage ever, and I'm skeptical, and I'm almost confident that there won't be a mid-range release for Battlemage either. However, a low mid tier card. While I'm skeptical about that ever being released, I entertain the thought of that happening. However, that can only be determined at Computex, and so far there haven't been many rumors that are even close to any confirmation. Everyone only knows about the 24GB of VRAM and the BMG G31 die. That has been around for a while, but so far, whether or not that is for a workstation type or consumer has not been confirmed. The 24 VRAM buffer has been rumored for both the B580 Professional and the BMG G31 die. Both of those were rumored to have 24GB of VRAM, so it's very difficult to speculate whether or not this will ever come to consumer markets. I think it will be a workstation, but I'd like to entertain the thought that there's like a 10% chance of this happening. But I highly doubt that it will, unfortunately. Intel is really not in the compute space to be able to compete at that level. And let me add one more timestamp real quick. We are at 18 minutes. 18. Alright, so Asus RTX 5060 cards range between $340 and $410 in early Best Buy listings. That's at least $40 above Nvidia's MSRP, or it is around $110 above MSRP. Now, to be fair, the 5060 would have probably been priced at $350 if I'm being completely honest. If it weren't for the reduction in MSRP, they probably would have pushed $350. I don't think they're bold enough to push $400 for a 5060. So I'm assuming Asus TUF is the one that leaked it. A trio of Geforce RTX 5060 graphics cards has been listed at Best Buy in the US. These RTX 5060 retail pages appear to have been published a week too early. Perhaps more importantly, they are coming in at prices significantly above the touted $299 starting price. MSRP is not starting price, it is a suggestion. Ranging between $340 and an eye-watering $410. The retailer listings now deleted provided prices and may confirm some key details of the yet-to-launch RTX 5060 graphics cards from the Asus Prime, regular and OC, and TUF overclock families. Nvidia has officially stated it will launch the RTX 5060 exactly a week from now, so perhaps someone at Best Buy had a mix-up with the calendar. You're also expecting pricing at or very close to $299, but these 8GB VRAM cards are priced at up to $110 more for the Asus TUF OC model. So it is an overclock model, and to be fair, Asus doesn't necessarily release MSRP cards. They typically are above MSRP. I wouldn't end up like saying like this is completely outrageous when Asus literally almost never released a MSRP card to my knowledge. I think all of their cards have been above MSRP on the market. The best price is $340, what is essentially Asus' lowest tier prime effort, without any factory overclock applied. Which is the point of your lowest tier. Your lowest tier is your MSRP, so this is on Best Buy, and there's no image over here. This is just a placeholder. Then it was priced at $340, and we can confirm the 8GB of VRAM. We can't confirm anything else about it. I wonder if it's going to be a three slot card, or if it's going to be able to squeeze 2 slots. Let me look. Oh wait, they have the boost clocks and everything. Okay, after closer scrutiny, we are sure that many of these details we see on Best Buy are placeholders, while the model names and pricing may very well be correct. Details concerning the base boost clocks of 1 and 2 GHz and a power requirement of 250 TGP are erroneous of lifted from previous launch models. Also, in what would be an unfortunate modern trend, if correct, these graphics cards surely can't all be 304mm in length, plus the tough model is listed as 3.25 slots wide. Ooh, so it's a little over 3 slots. It's fat. That is very fat. Man, I hope this thing ain't gonna be a fat card. I really do, because like, if this thing is more than 3 slots, then I mean, you might as well just like save up extra for like a 5070 or 5070 Ti, if I'm being completely honest, or like a 9070 XT or 9070, because there's a point where like performance and power draw are like, they stand little against the actual size of a graphics card. And if you are paying for a pretty chunky graphics card, and it's really not even, and it's basically the low end of that generation, then I mean, you're not really utilizing the space of your PC chassis to its full potential. You're almost wasting space if it's this chunky. Because 304mm in length and 3.25 slots wide is beefy. And this is for the tough model, and the tough model is an overclock model, if I remember correctly. Yeah, the tough is an overclock model. So like, when it comes to low-end cards, I don't recommend buying overclock models. I would always recommend like saving a little extra if you can, and then buying something a little more high-end that's in the next tier, but a base model of that. Never like go for overclocked or premium low-end cards. It's a waste of money in its entirety. The only time an overclocked low-end card is useful is if you're like doing esports gaming and you don't really need a particularly beefy card. But other than that, you really shouldn't go for overclocked model cards. Base models are more than fine. They are perfectly fine for the average consumer. But due to the unfortunate state of the specifications in the Best Buy listings, we can't share any insightful details from these models. So for example, we can't let you know what kind of factory overclock is present with the Asus Prime RTX 5060 OC model. There's a delivery on. Alright, that's over. However, we are pretty sure the factory overclock won't be worth the $40 premium Best Buy is asking. Just before finishing this report, we noticed that Best Buy has pulled the listings, so thankfully we screen grabbed the key details except from the Prime RTX 5060 OC model. Retail page, which mentioned the price of $380 or $379.99 to be precise. As a reminder, Nvidia and its partners will officially roll out the RTX 5060 graphics cards a day ahead of Computex 2025 on Monday, May 19th. Controversially, reviewers won't have drivers until the same date, dashing hopes of thorough launch day reviews. This should also be taken as a warning not to buy any RTX 5060 on pre-order. And this was the biggest show of hand of Nvidia, where they did not provide any press release drivers, because while sending a graphics card to a review is not obligatory, right? This isn't a thing of AMD, Intel, and Nvidia owes it to reviewers to send them cards, unless it's in their contract that literally every card that they are going to launch, they need to send out at least one variant of that card. And to my knowledge, there's not a single reviewer with such a contract with Nvidia, AMD, or Intel. Instead, they have contracts with board partners where they will test certain cards, they'll do certain polls, whatever kind of videos that is in their contract, but it's not obligatory that they have to be sent these cards out for review. So I do agree that Nvidia not sending cards out to reviewers is purposefully done, because they either don't believe in their driver, how do I put this, they do not stand by their driver, how do I put this now, the driver is not in the most complete package at the moment. I guess I can't really think of the term that I want to really mention. And at the same time, the card itself is probably underperforming, and they want consumers to buy these cards before reviewers are able to. Because while Nvidia did not have to send out cards for review, that is one thing, but the lack of press release drivers meant that these reviewers could not get cards from any of the board partners, because those cards would still not be usable without the without the relevant drivers, which meant that Nvidia essentially did everything in their power for the reviewers to not review their cards before the launch. They want to get the people who do not watch reviews to buy these cards, and effectively, if their quantity is low enough, sell out before those who do watch reviews, making an attempt to buy the cards after watching said reviews. Because this is one of those things where if the stock is low enough and the card is actually a good performer, and you were waiting for reviews before making an informed purchase, you are essentially going to be burned by Nvidia, because those who do not watch reviews would probably be the ones buying out the stock while you are still waiting for a review to be released. Which is unfortunate, but that is the state that the current GPU market is in at the moment. It's unfortunate to see, but yeah, at the same time, I know Nvidia, AMD, and Intel, they aren't obligated to send out review cards and to just send cards to reviewers, period. So unless there's a contract, I'm not really going to burn them for not sending GPUs to reviewers. What I would burn them for is intentionally manipulating the market. That is what I would burn the company for. I would not burn them for not sending out a review copy. And I don't think I've seen any of the GPU reviewers even discuss the fact that it isn't about them not sending out a review. It's the fact that, okay, well, some of them have spoken about consumers not being able to make informed decisions because there's no review to reflect on, but they haven't really gone into discussing how this is just Nvidia manipulating the market to ensure that these cards are blindly bought. But I think that's enough of that. I will close this off and put in a timestamp for the next article. So have a look. I don't think I added one. Okay, here we go. Let me... 32... Nvidia adds Vulkan compatibility to smooth motion frame generation, complete with a boost for emulators. So as is my investigation into switching over to Linux, I've noticed that a lot of people, before I even dive into this, I've noticed that a lot of people on older hardware where they were CPU bottlenecked have found performance improvements, and they overcame the emulation that hurts performance of Linux gaming, which brought me to Vulkan API games, because between DirectX and Vulkan, Vulkan is supposed to be closer to the hardware than DirectX is, so you should see gaming performance improvements in Vulkan compatible games. So if Nvidia is releasing Vulkan API versions of drivers, that would be a very good thing. But at the same time, we need game developers to also develop, or at least port their games to Vulkan as well. I think garbage collection is happening. Sounds like it. It's pretty loud. I hope it doesn't mess up with the audio. But let's go into this, right? Nvidia's latest driver-based frame generation technology, the RTX 50 series exclusive, now supports all three major gaming APIs. A user on Nvidia's subreddit confirmed that Smooth Motion steadily received an update. No, not steadily, they stealthily. Yeah. Smooth Motion steadily received. Wow, again. Actually, this is too loud, hang on. I think it's safe enough to continue. Let me start from the beginning. Nvidia's latest driver-based frame generation technology in the RTX 50 series exclusive now supports all three major gaming APIs. A user on the Nvidia subreddit confirmed that Smooth Motion stealthily received an update allowing the technology to support Vulkan titles in addition to DX11 and DX12. In addition, Vulkan support will allow smooth motion to work with emulators, bringing frame generation to older games that are emulated through Proton or DXVK. Smooth motion is Nvidia's competitor or counterpart to AMD fluid motion frames. It's more that fluid motion frames are the competitor or counterpart of Nvidia's smooth motion frames. Just like AFMF, smooth motion is a driver-based frame generation technology that works in any game as long as the API is supported, and is completely developer agnostic. Now, if only DLSS could do this, that would be such a blessing if DLSS could do that. Unfortunately, it does not. People would brag that FSR is driver based, but that is FSR1 firstly, so it's pretty smudgy, and FSR on a whole, the software versions from FSR1 all the way to FSR3 and 3.1 are particularly worse than DLSS 3 and DLSS 2, and unfortunately the FSR 4 came pretty late, unfortunately, but that is something that had to happen at some point. They could not continue on a software level and remotely compete with Nvidia if they wanted to make market share. Over here we can see the smooth motion includes DirectX 11, DirectX 12 and Vulkan APIs respectively, which is pretty cool to see that it's now allowing that. On another note, if I eventually switch to Linux, man, I need to first get like a list of like supported games on Linux before I can definitely make the switch. And I also need to have a look at the readiness of SteamOS, because if SteamOS does come to PC soon, then I'll just try and wait out on Windows 10 and then make the switch over to SteamOS, because I'm not going to switch to Linux only to switch over to SteamOS in a couple of months, man. I'm not going to put myself through that learning curve if I don't have to. The Reddit user discovered Smooth Motion's new update in the Nvidia app, where Nvidia added Vulkan to the technology's minimum requirements in the description. Most games nowadays take advantage of DirectX 11 or DirectX 12, but Vulkan support will allow Smooth Motion to work with a relatively small pool of Vulkan exclusive games. Smooth Motion is now at parity with AFMF, at least in terms of game support, with Vulkan support. Now, one area where Nvidia's driver-based frame generation tech is still superior is GPU compatibility. Supporting multiple generations of Radeon GPUs, Smooth Motion by contrast only supports RTX 50 series GPUs for the time being. That said, Nvidia's software-based frame generation is technically worse than the hardware frame generation. Just to be completely clear, the quality is worse. It's similar to FSR, where FSR is compatible technically with like any GPU, but it's still worse than DLSS 2, if we're being completely honest with ourselves. I would rather take DLSS 2 and be locked in Nvidia's ecosystem than have to deal with the trashy FSR 2 or FSR 3, man. I'm just being completely honest. Moving on with the technology allegedly coming to the RTX 40 series in a future update. So it is compatible at least. However, there is no time frame for the update, nor is there any word on whether the tech will make its way to older GPUs such as the RTX 30 and 20 series. Now, I doubt those two generations will have the benefit of smooth motion in the drivers. However, what they do have at their disposal is DLSS 4. You can have your 2060 running DLSS 4 and it will be pretty good if we're being completely honest. Smooth motion is an alternative version of DLSS 3 or 4 frame generation that generates an entirely new frame using AI to boost frame rates. Smooth motion works at the driver level, generating new frames independently from the game engine itself. DLSS 3 4 frame generation by contrast is embedded into a game engine by the game developers, improving image quality. AMD's AFMF counterpart works the same, but at the same time of writing, it uses an Nvidia non-AI based approach to generate the frames. So the quality is significantly worse, like I said. And that brings us to the end of that. I think it's interesting that Vulkan is getting the support, and I really hope that more games start including the Vulkan API in the compatibility layer, because I really want to switch over to Linux. I'm itching to switch over. It's just that at the moment I'll be completely honest, I haven't been doing too much research, but the research that I have been doing does show that there is a bit of a learning curve that goes into using Linux, and not necessarily using it to its full potential, but at least using it effectively, you know, because if you're not using Linux effectively, you might as well just have Windows 10 or Windows 11, if we're being completely honest. But if you can use it effectively, it can be a superior experience. The only difference is that I still haven't been doing much research as far as the gaming side of things, which is something that I do want to look into. I want to look into which games have effectively seamless support in Linux, which games have emulated support in Linux, and how does the emulated experience affect the performance, and which games are just not working on Linux. I want to figure out all of that before I actually make the switch to Linux, because I just don't want to switch over to Linux and then have to switch back to Windows 10, because I didn't really do enough research to use Linux effectively, and there's some incompatibility issues that I was not prepared for. So AMD's RX 9060 XT Elite specs allege speedy 3.3 GHz GPU clock. And this is, we've been seeing a couple of rumors about this card having around under 205 watt TDP. We've seen prices of like, what was it? 400 US dollar range? There was a range that was around 400 US dollars, if I remember correctly. Which, if we're being completely honest, that if it does come around that price, this card is not going to get very far in the generation in terms of sales. Now people will buy it just to spite Nvidia, but unfortunately they're not buying it because it's the superior option. Hang on, I'm getting a call. Alright, I'm back. With its expected Computex unveiling just a week away, the key specifications of AMD's Radeon RX 9060 XT appear to have spilled forth onto the internet. The tip comes from prolific leaks to Momo US, but we had to double take as the otherwise detailed post doesn't mention the assumed subject of the leak. However, any kind of leak requires a pinch of salt, and this aligns roughly with expectations of the aforementioned RX 9060 XT. So let's just add a few more grains and take a closer look. So according to the leaker, Momo US supposed to have up to 3,330 megahertz and a game clock of 2,780 megahertz, and then another variant at 3,290 megahertz. Why can't I read this morning? And a game clock of 2,700 megahertz. It's going to be sporting 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 across a 16x PCIe 5.0. It's going to have 2048 shader units, 20 gigabits per second memory speed across a 128-bit memory bus. It's going to have 2 display ports, 1 HDMI port, and 1 8-pin power connector. Decoding the above, we have perhaps a reference and OC model of the RX 9060 XT being highlighted. The faster card can boost its Navi 44 XT RDNA 4 GPU with 2048 okay, we already went over the specs. I'm not going to continue to do that. It's supposed to have a TGP of under 200 watts, excuse me. The MSRP, again, there was that 400 estimate where there was a range, and I think the 400 was within that range for the pricing of that card. Having a look. I do not see anything else to really look into. I don't really see much else to look into. I think that if it comes in near the $400 price point, it is not going to make market share for AMD, unfortunately. I highly doubt that it will. If that ends up happening, I hope for AMD's sake that they do not do that. Let me add another timestamp. Unfortunately, man, that article is a lot shorter than I thought it would have been, but it's better to be short and sweet. Let's go 51 minute mark. 51, let's say 05. So AMD says AM5 platforms can support CUDIMMs but won't commit to a release date. There is the potential of AMD's AM6 socket going with CUDIMM memory modules. I don't think the AM5 platform will, unless it's like the final generation of CPUs that will get that support, but I don't think they will, because CUDIMM is still such a niche market. I think it has a better place in APUs, if I'm being completely honest. Even though AMD's AM5 platform is designed to support all features of the DDR5 modules, including CUDIMMs, the company's existing Ryzen 7000 cannot work with CUDIMMs at all, whereas Ryzen 8000, Ryzen 9000 series CPUs do not fully support such modules. Nonetheless, AMD's AM5 infrastructure has everything to support clocked, unbuffered memory modules, according to... oh wait, I keep thinking of CAM2 and CUDIMMs being the same thing. Excuse me. But I think CUDIMMs will probably be in the next generation. According to the product management, according to Sarab Deer, product management lead for gaming and workstations who spoke to the digital trends. As memory technology evolves, innovations include not only memory chips with a high data transfer rate, but also new DIMM technologies such as CUDIMMs. In fact, GEDEC's standards presume that all memory modules featuring memory speeds of 6,400 megatransfers per second and higher are CUDIMMs. According to AMD, CUDIMM does not require a platform overhaul. AM5 is already equipped with everything needed to support all kinds of DDR5 enhancements. However, it may take AMD another generation of CPUs to fully support CUDIMMs, as Radeon did not explicitly say that AMD's existing or upcoming processors will officially support CUDIMMs at some point. Now, for now, 7000 series processors are completely incompatible with CUDIMM memory modules. If installed, the system will fail to boot. By contrast, Ryzen 8009 series CPUs can technically work with CUDIMMs, but only in a limited fallback configuration known as bypass mode, which ignores the clock driver chip on the module and therefore offers no advantage. This means that the system will start in DDR5 3200 mode and will require manual adjustments of the memory transfer rate, and therefore there will be no performance guarantees. It is noteworthy that MSI confirmed that AMD's Ryzen 8000 and 9000 series processors will support CUDIMM modules, memory modules on X870 and X870E motherboards. MSI's overclocker topic explained that MSI's latest X87 motherboards feature enhanced signaling capabilities, which improve compatibility with high-frequency memory modules. While Ryzen 9 and 8000 series CPUs could operate with CUDIMMs, the full extent of supported memory speeds is still unannounced, and it's unclear whether AMD's implementation will match the performance levels on Intel's Arrow Lake S, which already supports speeds of 9200 megatransfers per second and higher. Achieving speeds around 10,000 megatransfers per second still relies on heavily optimized setups with cherry-picked memory chips and increased voltages, which limits near-term mainstream use. CUDIMM modules are designed for officially rated speeds starting at 6,400 megatransfers per second, but most high-end CUDIMM kits are intended for Intel's platform, specifically because Intel has designed the architecture to utilize it. I think CUDIMMs is going to be on AM5. I was referring to CAM2 memory. I don't think CAM2 is going to be an AM5 thing. I think it will be an AM6 thing maybe. And even then, I only see CAM2 being in the mobile market in terms of being successful, or even the mini PC market, because if there's one thing mini PCs gotta do is stop getting bigger, because there are some chunky mini PCs. Just give me a mini PC that's like the width and length of a 120mm fan. Give me that dimensions and like a height of maybe 3 120mm fans. So they're how thick? Can say they are 20mm thick, right? So that would be around 60mm thick, which is decently chunky. Let me have a look real quick at my own mini PC. Now, to be fair, this thing is literally like in a dismantled state, so I can't really get an accurate measurement of it. It is under 60mm in thickness without the feet. With the feet, it is around 60mm in height. which is hilarious because I think that thing is going to go upwards of 80 millimeters thick when I eventually slap a Noctua low profile cooler on it. That's going to be fun when I do that. Honestly, if it can be repaired, that's the thing. Like, hopefully by either next month or the following month, I can contact that laptop repair center and find out by them if they are available to make an attempt at repairing it. If they are, I will liaise with them to figure out what's going to happen, and hopefully it's repairable, because if it is repairable, that is a big win. That is a big win, because that thing costs like $430 and I mean, that's excluding shipping, which was an added 50, I think. No, it was 60 because there was also shipping taxes. So it was effectively closer to $500. Now, to be fair, I was contemplating between going with the mini PC and going AM4 platform with the Ryzen 5700X, 32 gigabytes of DDR4. I think that would have been 3200 megatransfers per second, and I think it was a 1 terabyte SSD that I would have gone with. That build would have cost around the same, but I did not go with that. And if I can't repair the mini PC, it's gonna be a huge kick in the butt. However, let's move on to the next article. Alright, so a 48GB dual GPU Intel Arc B580 is reportedly in the works, Computex reveal room. So if this is a dual GPU, I wonder how it's going to fare against other workstation GPUs, because I get the feeling this thing is going to have mad latency when it comes to performance. And AIB is reportedly preparing a dual GPU variant of Intel's rumored Arc B580, 24GB, totaling 48GB of VRAM on a single board via video cards. According to the source, this model is slated to be revealed at Computex 2025, which is just days away at this point. Specific details like the AIB, interconnect technology and price are in the dark, but we can expect more details at the trade show if the rumors are true. And then just watch this card be like $700 or $800. This is the third leak that references a 24GB edition of the Arc B580 following EEC filings from Maxsun and an earlier slip-up from Sparkle. It's quite surprising that the GPU that's supposedly supposed to rival the 4060 is getting a 24GB configuration. Many PCs don't even possess that much system memory. That is through 16GB of standard memory, still the vast majority of gamers. 32GB is, I think, at 30% according to the Steam hardware survey, if I remember correctly. In any case, these cards are intended as a cost-effective solution. I don't know where I got low from. I'm probably dyslexic. For AI and machine learning developers, where similar capacity cards from AMD and Nvidia carry a steeper price tag. The most affordable Blackwell GPU with 24GB of memory is the RTX Pro 4000, costing over $1,500 based on preliminary listings. The AIB is apparently doubling down on this approach by building a dual GPU solution housing two of these rumored 24GB B580 GPUs on a single PCB. Keep in mind this product is reportedly a one-time design from that AIB not a standard reference model from Intel. Traditionally, multi-GPU setups nowadays, like Nvidia's B200 and Apple's M1 Ultra, rely on their own advanced interconnect solutions like NVLink and Ultra Fusion. While Intel does have Xe-Link, it likely isn't compatible with the B580 and would be costly for a one-off product. The most probable contender is a PCIe bridge, linking the GPU's interfaces, allowing them to communicate through one slot. Even so, the system will likely recognize the card as two separate GPUs. Some simulation programs where latency isn't a concern would probably utilize all 24GB of VRAM as one large resource. However, as the memory isn't pooled, using both GPUs for AI may require some optimizations on your end, including techniques like model parallelism and data parallelism. I'm tongue-tied, I cannot say that one. With that in mind, don't expect this GPU to be cheap. My estimate puts this around 700 and 800. Yep, I expected the same thing, brother. Which should still be significantly lower than the rumored $4,500 figure for Nvidia's RTX Pro 5000 Blackwell 48GB. However, you'd be sacrificing compute power and the convenience of a shared VRAM pool. Alternatively, you may consider mini PCs or laptops powered by AMD's Strix-Halo with up to 128GB of unified memory, which I support. I support the recommendation of Strix-Halo if you are VRAM limited. Go Strix-Halo, set that thing to have 96GB of VRAM tailored towards the 8060S, and then Bob's your uncle, you can just run your AI workloads or whatever VRAM intensive task that you're busy with in that method. Not only that, but let me have a look at this real quick, because we are effectively done with this article. I can close it. 8060S versus not the 980M versus the B580. I want a comparison between these two, because this thing, if it outperforms, that is bad, bro. It leads by 8%. That is crazy. Nah, bro, nah. Look at this. No, bro. No, bro. Oh, okay, hang on. So it does have less teraflops than the B580. That could potentially cause a disruption. However, they have similar shader unit count. Slightly lower clock, but I think you could get away with an overclock if you have a mini PC version. It does have less ROPs. It has more ray tracing cores though. It's a PCIe 516X interface. That is, oh bro, no. Also has a more advanced shader model. It has a lower Vulkan model though, and lower OpenCL. No, look at the synthetics. It's 8.3. It's leading by 8.3 in the synthetics. Oh, that is bad. And as far as performance is concerned, and these were benched at 1080p 1440p and 4K. In 4K is 7.1% faster, 1080p 4%, and 1440p it's at 2.9% bit FPS. Baldur's Gate as a 4.5% uplift. The Counter-Strike 2 difference is 8%, 7.1% for Cyberpunk 77. That is, oh my word. Oh wait, here we go. let's do this. We'll do 1080p high, and Cyberpunk still gets like 90 FPS. That is actually ultra. 85. Hang on. This card is low key. This thing is low key a 1440p contender. I'm not gonna lie. Look at this. You can get like 60 FPS in Cyberpunk's 2077. I did not look into the 8060S APU actually. I'd never looked at it before. Oh, look at this in gaming though. Oh, look at this in gaming. It's 10% ahead. Oh, that is sad, bro. That is sad. That is so sad. Now the difference is that your B580 is going to be upgradable, but considering most people upgrade every like 4 to 6 years, and some people go on for bloody 10 years, I would much rather recommend them buy a Strix Halo mini PC if they can afford it, man. Like, oh, that is, and I'm willing to bet the entire system uses less wattage than the B580 at the same time. That is the most embarrassing part of this. It uses less power than the entire B580. That entire system, you can probably connect the monitor to that thing and it will still draw less power than an Arc B580. I bet your entire setup with the Strix Halo will probably be under 190 watts, if I'm being completely honest. Like, you stick a portable monitor to that thing, like let's say you have a laptop, that entire laptop will probably use less power than this thing does. And it still outperforms it, man. That is the, ooh, that is sad. Oh. But I do want to check one more thing, the 8060S. I just want to check which Strix Halo product has it. Because, oh, is it only with this thing? Oh, that's disappointing. Oh, that is disappointing. Hang on here. AMD Strix Halo. Take me to AMD's website. Please, bro, AMD.com. What the hell? And this is just purely for my own sake. Ryzen AI Max. Oh, bro, come on, bro, no. Show me your lineup. Oh. There's one thing that I do need to look into, because up to 83%, 23%, so I'll probably knock this down to 60, knock that down to like 15, and knock that down to like 10. Let me have a look at their lineup. Show me your lineup. Oh, bro. Okay, seriously though? You know what? Bro, the default TDP of this thing is 55 watts. The default TDP of this is also 55 watts. This would technically be the most compatible one for me. The only problem is like I'll need to, let me go 8060S versus this. I'll go to here, have a look at this, because the B580 was a decently performing GPU. However, I am more interested in oh, this thing can having a look. Let me go 1440p high. And over here we can see everything is 60 plus. Cyberpunk 77 is at 56 FPS, so it's slightly under. If you can overclock these GPUs, then I would probably overclock it. So it's a decent 1440p performer, because at the end of the day, Cyberpunk 2077 is still not really an easy title to run for low to mid-range cards. The Witcher 3 remastered. That is insane. Insane. But yeah, it all comes down to price availability, if I'm being completely honest, because this thing is, because I don't need more than 8 cores. I don't need that. And to be fair, this thing is like, unless it has a lower end encode, I probably won't go with the 8060S, if I'm being completely honest. I might go with the 8060S if I do not intend on buying Medusa-IO. But other than that, I wouldn't mind buying a laptop with this. Let me have a look at this real quick. I do not see much in that link. I can have a look, but I doubt this thing is going to be with a... oh, it has a 370, so no. Ah, that is disappointing. That is disappointing. Either way, I am a huge supporter of switching to Strix-IO if way possible. But right now it's not really in the cards for me. I will probably make the switch to Medusa-IO over Strix-IO. The only problem that I would have is how SteamOS utilizes the hardware at its disposal. But let me not dwell any longer. We've already gone on for 25 minutes, which is pretty long on this topic. We have how many articles left? We have 4 left, 5 left. Let me not waste too much time going over stuff. Not going over stuff, I mean going on tangents. You do that. Alright, so Nvidia and Mediatek's AI CPU may not see mass rollout until late 2026. Asus, Dell, and Lenovo reportedly developing N1X desktop and laptops. So if this does release in late 2026, that would put it up against CPUs like Medusa, Medusa Point. Medusa-IO is probably 2027. 2027 mid to late. Unfortunately, if there's any delays, it'll go even closer towards 2028, if not in 2028. It is the unfortunate part of the Point and Halo stack up. So looking at this, Nvidia and Mediatek's hotly anticipated AI PC chips may not see meaningful shipment volumes to the mass market until the second half of 2026, according to a new report. As reported by DigiTimes, Nvidia and Mediatek are expected to jointly unveil their new N1 ARM chips for Windows PCs at Computex. According to DigiTimes, the joint chip will likely debut under the Nvidia brand, with both N1X and N1 models planned, echoing previous reports. DigiTimes says that both companies are well into production ramp-up. However, states insiders believe meaningful shipment volumes won't emerge until the second half of 2026. The chips which we expect to be unveiled at Computex next week will mark the second offspring of Nvidia and Mediatek's newly minted partnership, inaugurated by the GB10 chip unveiled earlier this year. As the reports notes, early N1X benchmarks Intel performance that lags behind the ARM-based PC chips, noting the results have raised industry concerns. Perhaps more worryingly, DigiTimes reiterates reports that there are unresolved integration issues with endpoint devices. These manufacturing headaches have previously been reported elsewhere and could explain the hefty lead time of 2H26 on these chips. In a separate report, DigiTimes claims that Nvidia and Mediatek roadmap includes commercial N1X AI notebooks targeted at both high-end consumers and commercial markets with 128 to 200 AI TOPS compute performance. DigiTimes also reports that consumer AI notebooks will adopt the N1C processor platform, now delayed until 2026 because of tariffs and inflation. The report claims Dell, Hewlett Packard, HP, Lenovo and Asus are all in the pipeline to launch desktop and notebook models, with MSI and Compal also entering the supply chain. Also in the pipeline is Nvidia's DFX station featuring the GB300 Grace Blackwell Ultra Superchip. According to the report, it will feature 748 GB of memory and be capable of 20,000 TOPS AI computing performance, which will work with both Windows and Mac OS. That is, so this thing is going to be in direct, it will directly compete with Medusa Point then if it ends up releasing in late 2026, around the time that Medusa Point releases. That is very concerning now, because that means this thing is going to underperform then. Because historically, delaying a CPU into another generation has never been a good idea. Bulldozer did not do well when that happened. Bulldozer massively underperformed because it released too late due to delays. Add another timestamp over here. So it only took 5 minutes to go over that. That is cool. Means we are making good time. So Zen 5 comes to small businesses. AMD unveils EPYC 4005 series processors. I'm not really going to go into the article itself. I'm just going to have a look at the specs that they have available. So they have 16 core and 32 thread with L3 cache of 128 megabytes, default TDP of 170 watts, base frequency of 4.3 gigahertz, max frequency is 5.7 gigahertz. What in the... Hang on here. Wait, these are no better than Zen 5. What is happening? What is happening? Hang on. Hang on here, hang on. Let me scan through this real quick. I thought this would have been something interesting that came to the market, but it does not seem to. I might as well scrap this then, because what the... I might as well scrap this article then, because there's really... What is this? This is EPYC based on EPYC, blah blah blah, but unless you can shove like 256 gigabytes of RAM into this thing, there is no... Oh, it supports up to 192 gigabytes of DDR5, 5600 megahertz with ECC. You know what? Never mind. I changed my mind. It's not really that much of a waste, if I'm being completely honest now. Like if you're in a mini home server and you need more RAM than anything else, at 192 gigabytes of DDR5 5600 is going to be worth it. But at the same time, because that's probably the flagship, right? I cannot type today. You know what? Does it support ECC? I saw a yes. I saw a yes for ECC support. Where's it at? Where it at? Show me. Show me. ECC support requires motherboards. Yep, and we have consumer grade AM5 ECC support motherboards out there. So I take it back. Never mind. I'm not changing up. No, this is a waste. We have Zen 5 for this, and to be fair, this thing isn't priced that much better than Zen 5 anyway. And the ECC, like, Zen 5 supports this. AM5 supports this, I mean. TDP doesn't really matter. 28 PCIe lanes. I think the AM5 Zen 5 variants are better off. And yeah, I thought this article would be interesting. Just looking at the specs and everything, man, that was just a complete waste to even open that article. I should probably just... I need to wake up earlier so that I can just review some of the articles, so that I can just go over them roughly. Probably make a few notes and then just speed things up for a stream, if I'm being completely honest. But oh, that was disappointing. And let me move on. 25, 25. Let's do that. So the RTX 5090 with Core 2 Duo Nvidia driver changes opens up bizarre system build options. So I wonder what these driver changes are. Is it just compatibility or overhead? Nvidia's newest drivers no longer require the system CPU to support the POP-CNT instruction. We don't know why this change has been made. However, there are some fascinating implications regarding what you might call mismatch hardware. For example, tech enthusiast Bob Pony observed that due to this driver change, you could possibly pair a GeForce RTX 5090 with an Intel Core 2 Duo. We'd like to see it, and surely we will see this exact scenario tested by a tech tuber shortly. It will probably just be a meme that they do in a short or something. Blah blah blah. La la la. Let's read this part. POP-CNT is a CPU instruction and a short form derived from population count. Processors use it to determine how many bits are actively set in a given binary number. Notably, it is part of the SSE 4.2 instruction set. Given that you have to go back more than a decade and a half to find processors without native POP-CNT support, it doesn't really concern anyone who wants a practical workman-like PC for typical 2025 workloads. POP-CNT may seem like an obscure processor instruction, but it has been in the news previously, with popular software insisting upon it being supported by the system CPU. Case in point, Microsoft's Windows 11 24H2 introduced a requirement for POP-CNT hardware support. That change came to light around a year ago, alongside other requirements such as tech as secure boot and TPM support. It ruled out a host of older CPU generations from official Windows 11 OS compatibility. That's funny to see, but I wonder how this will affect the driver overhead, because Nvidia does have more driver overhead than AMD does, but it's still not as impactful on the general gaming performance as it would be for Intel Battlemage. And we just blitzed through this article. I don't really have much to say about it, other than it being pretty interesting to see that you can match up a core duo, which would be a hilariously huge bottleneck for the 5090, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's not about whether or not you should, it's whether or not you can. Let me add one more timestamp. And it's not that one. Is it this one? No, it's not this one. Where is the heading? Where is the heading, and why are you not scrolled to where I need you to be? Okay, here we go. We are just blitzing through these final articles, honestly. Could be that I am getting a bit sleepy, which is hilarious because it's early in the morning. Let's do that. And then go over here. So Intel Xe4 and AMD GFX 13 codenames surface for the next-gen Druid GPUs. Excuse me. It seems that software divisions at AMD and Intel are setting the stage for the next generation GPU offerings. Internal codenames for these GPUs, Intel's Xe4 and AMD's GFX 13, have been spotted by Kepler, and x86 is dead and back at X, as noted by video cards. While this does not allude to the specifications, it shows that both teams are actively pouring resources into the development of their future graphics products. Intel officially confirmed its 4th generation Arc GPUs will be codenamed Druid, employing the Xe4 architecture a while back. The firm has been notably quiet regarding its future GPU roadmap following Alchemist. With limited pre-launch hype, the desktop launch of Battlemage Xe2 last December was also somewhat of a surprise. That being said, the successor of Battlemage, codenamed Celestial Xe3, will arrive with Intel's Panther CPUs, which are scheduled for high-volume manufacturing later this year. Based on employee reports, Celestial has reportedly reached pre-silicon validation, where hardware design flaws are identified and resolved before committing to the manufacturing. Tom Peterson's comments support this, stating Celestial's hardware is baked, with software optimization the remaining task. He also added that the hardware teams have moved on to the next project, Druid Xe4, based on comments to the Dawn repository. The developers are starting to integrate support for Xe4, which should fall under Intel's Gen 15 umbrella. Internally, AMD uses GFX XX codenames to represent or identify different GPU IP blocks, and often find these designations tied to the GPU architecture, like GFX12 or RDNA 4 in Linux kernel patches or firmware packages. According to a patch shared by leaker Kepler, AMD's next generation GPUs will be part of the GFX 13 series. As of now, the exact architecture has not been revealed, so the likely choices are between UDNA 1 and RDNA 5. Now, from what I suspect, there would probably be RDNA 5, and finally we will have UDNA as an architecture, which I cannot wait for. I am excited for a unified architecture that AMD goes with, because dividing your teams between gaming architectures and workstation, well, I mean not workstation, but data center GPUs, that is spreading yourself too thin. They should just make one extremely good architecture that can work for both. It's what Nvidia does, and it's worked. AMD has outlined its intent to unify the genome of its gaming-centric RDNA and compute-centric CDNA families under the banner of UDNA, similar to Vega. For comparison, Nvidia has taken a mixed approach with its products Volta and Turing, were separate architectures for data centers and consumers. Ampere combined the two foundations, but with the rise of generative AI, Nvidia dissected the two again with Hopper and Ada Lovelace. Blackwell now serves as the unified backbone of these two segments. A unified architecture leads to simplified development and better software support, but it might require compromising on specialized applications, which in this case will probably be gaming if not carefully handled. That being said, we're still several years away from both of these GPU launches, since Celestial on desktop is anticipated for a 2026 to 2027 reveal. I suspect 2027. It would be logical to expect Druid to follow sometime in 2028 or later, assuming AMD adheres to its typical 2-year cadence between GPU launches. Desktop products based on GFX 13 might be slated for late 2026 or early 2027, which, man, there is like a good chance that I would probably hold out if there is no super refresh to Nvidia Blackwell. I can hold out another year if I'm being completely honest. I'm not in any particular point a constraint to needing a 5070 Ti or 9070 XT. If there is a 5070 Ti Super or 5080 Super, I would upgrade to that if I'm being completely honest, but I don't want to commit too deeply. I might just take the 5070 Super because I still intend to switch over to Medusa-IO. I wanna go over to Medusa-IO when it releases, and hopefully Medusa-IO is a good performer, man. I am hoping that they are a good performer. Let me close this off. And keeping on topic with AMD, we are moving over to Threadripper. Let me add a timestamp first. And go with 45. There we go. Oh, right. Let's just have a look over here, and okay, everything's cool. So we'll be closing off with yet another confirmation points to Threadripper CPUs. So for those who don't know, companies like Pixar render their movies from Threadripper CPUs that just have a ton of memory, because they themselves have said that when it comes to rendering their movies, GPU compute is not that much faster than CPU compute, but what makes the biggest difference in rendering their movies comes down to the memory, and GPUs are significantly more memory limited than CPUs are. These Threadrippers can support insane amounts of system RAM, as you can see with Threadripper 7000 capacity. Let's do that. As you can see, this thing can support up to 1 terabyte of DDR5 5200 ARM memory across 4 channels, although typical maximum is 512 gigabytes. There is not a GPU in the professional setting that has anywhere close to that amount in VRAM. And when you have as many effects as like a Pixar movie can have, and as many components to a scene, it makes sense that you would switch over to Threadripper, which has much more memory, because I don't know if anyone has ever done any 3D modeling with massive renders, but when you do and you render it out, you just see the RAM just get chewed up, and it gets chewed up so fast. So to avoid them having to make many too many segments to their rendering, they just get Threadrippers with a ton of memory, so that they are not memory limited and can have longer render ranges in terms of timing, which saves a ton of time compared to like several 10-minute renders, 10-minute scenes that you can only render out, as opposed to like 20 minutes if you can have the RAM capacity for it. So in any case, there have been 9,000 variants of these Threadripper CPUs, and while this is not targeted towards me, I am very much still a supporter of using Threadripper where needed. Oh man, excuse me, got hiccups. Not many people are in the space to utilize a Threadripper CPU, but those who are vastly benefit over using Threadripper as opposed to an EPYC CPU. Not to mention the price difference, because EPYC is expensive, hugely expensive. And to be fair, EPYC doesn't have the same technology from a technical standpoint compared to Threadripper. But in any case, there hasn't been any confirmation of any clock speeds for base or turbo boost, but it seems the TDP is locked at 350 watts, which is interesting to see. We can see the Threadrippers go down to 12C, 24 threads, 16 cores, 32 threads. I don't know why though. That is weird to see, if I'm being completely honest. Any Threadripper that dips its toes into the consumer segment is weird in my opinion. Shame Threadripper is more expensive per core than EPYC. Where it is, I thought EPYC was more expensive. AMD really did kill off HEDT. HEDT's primary current and voltage is PCIe lane count. I run myself Precision 5820 because I have a bunch of stuff I prefer to be internally connected to my main rig. Unfortunately, I am an edge case user. Unreal Engine 6 will bring baked-in multi-threading around the PS6 release, which should thankfully shift gaming away from single-core, single-thread performance and makes its workloads more comparable to compute. Well, they are really for professional workloads, yes, and they have the money, they make a lot of money. Finally, they get rid of the non-pro variant. Yeah, did they? Oh, yeah, this is the non-pro variant. I mean, they should just keep it all at pro, because at the end of the day, there isn't a consumer that needs a Threadripper. There's only a professional that would need a Threadripper. And I've seen some people that do like editing pieces with Threadripper, and they'll copy 5090 and just do GPU accelerated video editing, and then I'm sat there like, so what was the point of your Threadripper then? Like, if you were really focused on getting a Threadripper for editing, I would expect you to just render the video with the Threadripper instead of the GPU. But no, they buy the Threadripper and the 5090 for an editing rig, which is extremely weird for me to say the least. But at the end of the day, you don't need a Threadripper for an editing rig. It used to be in the past that people would do that, but You don't need a Threadripper, if we're being completely honest. Intel is still perfectly capable with quick sync. And additionally, if you are in the professional setting, you use a Threadripper, you probably don't need a GPU that's too high end. You can go with mid-range. At least that's my assumption, that you don't need anything too high end, because if you're going to buy a Threadripper, you're obviously doing a high core count task that doesn't really rely on the GPU. But I might just be misunderstanding why some people would have a Threadripper. That does bring us to the end. Now that we've covered our final article for the day. Man, this is an hour and 42 minutes. There is a chance that I might just release some I might just like record some shorter videos just to have like shorter coverage of certain news articles, if I'm being completely honest. I do need to start recording and editing. I know that very well, that I need to start doing that at some point, and I should start today with that. Sure, the stream is here, but I'll probably repeat some of the articles that are covered, and then probably just keep it down to like 5 to 10 minutes of coverage of like 2 or 3 articles. But other than that, I probably won't do too much in terms of what I'll be covering. In any case, this is the end for today. The next stream will be tomorrow, same time. I'm thinking 9:30 maybe, but I'll keep it at 9. I'll try to make it for 9. I'll just have to wake up earlier and review the articles for the day. If I'm being completely honest, I need to stop being lazy. So I'll catch you guys in the next one, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.